Good afternoon and greetings to everyone there at the CEE conference in Krakow. My name is Dan Hill. My company is called Sensory Logic, and I'd like to take a few minutes before your last session to talk about the breakthroughs in brain science and their implications for marketing, and in particular marketing research, as it has to do with the unfulfilled needs of consumers and how you can capture and quantify those emotional responses that will direct you toward fulfilling on those needs. As we all know, there are things that consumers will not tell you. If you've never been lied to in life, congratulations. You are either extremely lucky or not paying attention. To give you an example of what we call the say feel gap, here's an example from Peter Mail's book called Up the Agency, from the time he spent working in ad agency world. The account executive says basically the client loves it. In fact, what that actually means is you get to start over. None of it's really that good, and you have to say something polite to get the creative team back to work, and it's going to take them days to get this all worked out. That is one version of the say feel gap, but not the only one. Besides what people won't tell you because they're being polite or giving you the smart answer or the safe answer, the groupthink answer, there are other issues, of course, with words. There can be simply literacy rate issues. There can be language and translation issues. And finally, I think most compelling of all, a professor at Oxford University estimates that 20% of the adults in the Western world, that's Europe and North America, are functionally illiterate. They have no real command of language. They're not able to articulate their unfulfilled needs, and yet those needs are real. And no major brand is going to want to fail to serve 1/5 of the adult population. So another approach is required. Besides what people won't tell you, the next big hurdle, the barrier to getting and tapping into unfulfilled needs, is how much consumers can't tell you. This is in fact the origins of sensory logic, because in 1998 someone I knew at IBM faxed over an article from American Demographics talking about the fact that over 95% of people's thought activity is not fully conscious. Now, as a market researcher, certainly you don't want to settle for 2% market share of people's mental activity, nor does your company want to settle for 2% market share, period. So this raises a fundamental challenge. How are you going to tap into emotions? How are you going to do it naturally, not asking people to think their feelings, but feel their feelings? And to do that, as Daniel Goleman suggests in his bestseller, Emotional Intelligence, you have to go to the nonverbal, because our verbal abilities reside in the rational part of the brain and are at risk of being consciously filtered by us and withholding what's really going on and what we need to have to be satisfied as a consumer. So let's talk about how consumers make decisions so we can better understand how unfulfilled needs arise in the first case. We have, in fact, not just one brain, but 3 brains, and they came during different stages of evolution. We have a sensory brain that's 500 million years old, often referred to as the reptilian brain. It's important for sight, but in fact the origins of the brain, a small node atop the spinal column. Our sense of smell is the origin of the brain. So Descartes got it wrong. When he said, "I think, therefore I am," he should have really said, "I have the capacity to smell, and therefore I think." Secondly, we have an emotional brain. It's 200 million years old, the mammalian brain. And third, a rational brain, which as you can see, merely 100,000 years old. It does not have first mover advantage. If anything, if we say 3 people is a crowd, the odd person out here is the rational brain. The sensory and the emotional brain work hand in glove. They both operate primarily on an intuitive level. The rational brain, where our verbal abilities reside, is a hard place to go as a market researcher to tap into those unfulfilled needs. So just to complete the picture, talking about the 3 brains, we know that you have a decision-making process that's essentially sense, feel, a little bit of thinking, and finally do. And what do I mean by that? 1/4 of the brain is devoted to processing visuals. If we're going to tap into unfulfilled needs, we need to know what is going to be the visual that really communicates that desire, that want, that need that right now is not being met. Secondly, everyone feels before they think. In fact, our emotional responses happen 5 times more quickly. There is no such thing as rationality, objectivity. There is emotions. Emotions color everything. So much so that the emotional brain sends 10 times as much information to the rational brain as vice versa. It's a trade imbalance. It's as if the emotional brain was China and the rational brain was Cuba. The emotional brain is older, it's more densely wired, it drives behavior overwhelmingly, and then finally we have, yes, the rational confirmation, the intellectual alibi, but that intellectual alibi does not get you back to meeting those needs. To put it another way, there's a wonderful quote from the American attorney Clarence Darrow. I don't like spinach, and I'm glad I don't, because if I liked it, I'd eat it, and I just hate it. That, I believe, is the true voice of the consumer, whether European or American. The chance to know on a more behavioral economics basis, over and above utility alone, tells you what's going on for the consumer and how you're going to satisfy them. Now, in a moment, you're going to hear today's final presentation at the conference with one particular bio-qual approach to tapping into TV spots. My company was part of the first stage of the neuromarketing initiative through the Advertising Research Federation in New York. In our case, we use a tool called facial coding, but we are well versed as well in knowing about EEG and a variety of biometrics along with fMRI brain scans. As I mentioned, the particular tool Sensory Logic uses in this space is called facial coding. It originated with none other than Charles Darwin. He was the first scientist to take emotions seriously. He figured that if they didn't matter to us, they would have been weaned out of us over the course of evolution. But in fact, they give us an adaptive advantage. And what is good for the individual is good for the company to make sure that your marketing dollars are working harder and smarter for you. And the same thing for your euro. So, in terms of facial coding and why it works so well, this is what Darwin came to realize. First, universality. Even a person born blind emotes the same way as you or I. In other words, it's hardwired into the brain. Not socialized, not learned. A child by 9 months of age has all of the core emotions on their face. Secondly, spontaneity. The face is the only place in the body where the muscles attach right to the skin. So you get quick, real-time data. Third, abundancy. Human beings have more facial muscles than any other species on the planet. So Charles Darwin was the originator of this tool. In the mid-1960s, Paul Ekman, working with his colleague Wally Friesen, began to go through and systematically figure out which muscles in the face correspond to which emotions. Paul calls it the facial action coding system. It involves 23 what he calls action units, which I love because action does indeed speak louder than words. And the 7 core emotions, they are happiness, surprise, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, and contempt. And these are emotions that we show in our face in a variety of ways. Depending on people self-reporting their emotions is inadequate. People do not think their feelings, they feel their feelings. They can feel them in multiple ways. They do it spontaneously, and they often feel, of course, multiple emotions at the same time. So a one-to-one correspondence is very artificial and inaccurate as market research. So Paul took this into the psychological dimension. He also, frankly, does work for the FBI and the CIA. In our case, we brought it into the market research fold starting 13 years ago, added in a scoring system and norms. My book, Emotionomics, chosen by Ad Age, as one of the top 10 must-read books of 2009. Now, to demonstrate the tool, I'm going to show you a video used as a promo for the Lie to Me show that was on Fox in recent years. It's based on facial coding. In fact, Paul Ekman Dr. Lightman, you can see the similarity in name choices for the lead character. Facial coding, I think, is an excellent way because it works from both verbal and nonverbal moments in research. So as people are explaining how they feel about something, purchase intent, it can be used there. It can be used as an overlay in focus groups. Whatever the format, it gives you an opportunity to get to those unspoken needs and to document accordingly. So that brings us to the end of my brief introduction, talking about the breakthroughs in brain science, how they open up a completely different model for looking at market research, driving us beyond the words themselves to picking up other aspects, particularly from the body, the face, the mind, as to what's happening for people. And if you want to read more, I do have 4 books published. These are the 2 most recent ones. And hope you enjoyed the last session and that you enjoyed the conference. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.